We have to start for the second session. I'll start with holding a presentation regarding where we stand at the moment, where the industry stands at the moment. I will provide also some feedback regarding the most potential, let's say, most probable market-based measures. The problem is, where we stand as an industry, we are here. This is the key problem of the industry. The vessel pollutes. The vessel emits something to the environment. So it could be the marine environment, it could be on the air. This is the key problem. The vessel emits, and we have to regulate all these emissions. So IMO has done a lot of work regulating all these emissions. We're having annexes of MARPOL, Annex 1 regarding oil, 2 and 3, 4, garbage, etc. Annex 6 regarding air emissions. We have regulations regarding anti-fouling. We have regulations on ballast. And we have, as I said earlier on, IMO is trying to, has done a lot of work to regulate air emissions. That could be SOx. That's why we have fuel legislation. They're trying to regulate NOx. We have the NOx technical code. And now they're trying to regulate CO2. This is why we have all these greenhouse gas regulations. Now, this is what the projection is for the up to 2020 for the industry. The point is that environmental legislation will change market competition for sure. I entered the industry 20 years ago, in the early 90s. 20 years ago, there was no vetting, there was no environmental legislation. Actually, as many of you still remember, there was no MARPOL at that time. Despite the fact that there was MARPOL on paper, there was no MARPOL in real life. There's no MARPOL. There was no posted control. There was nothing. Now, if you go back in the early 2000s, if you try to guess where the industry will stand, let's say in 2010, everyone will be out of the market. Why? You couldn't, let's say, predict anything of what happened in real life. You couldn't predict that we will have a piracy problem by 2010. You couldn't predict that we will have greenhouse gas legislation. You couldn't predict that we have sulfur legislation. You couldn't predict a number of issues that actually it's still a problem in these days. So we know for sure that the environmental legislation will change market competition, for sure. And we cannot do anything, let's say, more than see what is going on and try to be up to date. You all know that shipping is by far the most efficient way of transportation. You know, you've seen figures like this one. I'm sure you've seen figures like this one. This is from Reuters. By far the most energy efficient way of transportation. You couldn't change that. You see a comparison between a vessel and an air freighter. And actually, IMO is having a three-tier approach, to put it this way. IMO is working on technical measures. That would be, the key measure would be the EEDI. IMO is talking about operational measures. That would be energy efficiency operator and operational indicator, or CO2 index, as was previously known, and also the SEEMP energy efficiency management plan. And IMO is working on the third tier, the market-based measures. I will briefly say where we stand on the market-based measures later on. So we know that IMO is working in three key directions. Now, this is where we stand at the moment as an industry. All vessels need to be certified with a new certificate that is called International Energy Efficiency Certificate. Every vessel, existing a new one, should get a SEEMP Energy Efficiency Management Plan, known as SEEMP. And all vessels, through the SEEMP, need to monitor, in some sort of monitoring, energy efficiency operational index or indicator. So we have several uncertainties at the moment. You see, for example, SEEMP. We have guidelines. Some of the guidelines have recently amended in the latest MEPC. For example, SEEMP, would it be certified by a classification society? Normally, legislation says no. But there are certain classification societies, Spiro said this earlier on, this is a sales pitch, so everyone can say anything in order to sell. So it will be some sort of Eldorado of how these things will work. SEEMP, by the way, we will have a presentation by Mr. Medanis later on regarding SEEMP and energy management. SEEMP normally could be part of the company's SMS, or safety management system. We also have Energy Efficiency Design Index, which is applicable for new buildings. The deadline for the implementation of the new legislation is January the 1st of 2013. Now, you see all these small letters over there. Actually, this is the first attempt to globally mandate a regulation in any industry, We are responsible for approximately 3 to 4% of the global anthropocentric greenhouse gas emissions, and you cannot find any other sector in the industry, globally, that there's some sort of industry-wide legislation, I repeat, globally. So we have 7 SEEMP types, and we are expecting more. IMO has issued guidelines. We have 5 down, 5 to go. You see the revised ones with the green letters. These are recently revised during MEPC 63. We have new guidelines for the calculation of EEDI, for the verification of the EEDI, plus SEEMP trials, and the development of SEEMP. Actually, the guideline for the development of SEEMP has minor amendments compared to the previous one, the Circular 663. And we have, of course, guidelines for the energy efficiency operation indicator, plus new guidelines for the calculation of reference lines for the user with the EEDI. Still pending, you see on the right-hand side, ongoing review of the EEDI calculation. Yannis Kokarakis gave a presentation of the uncertainties of calculating the EEDI. It's I would say, a small mess. Some people say a big mess of how you exactly calculate the EEDI. We have minimum propulsion power for speed and maneuverability, CO2 abatement technologies, other SEEMP types. Spiros Zolotas from RINA gave a presentation on RORO, etc. And we have reference lines for the calculation methods, etc. So it's 5 down, 5 to go, more or less. You see the formula of calculating the EEDI for every SEEMP type. And you see the formula here. I will not go into details on the formula. The latest guidelines are approximately 80 pages of how you calculate the formula. You need more or less mathematicians, engineers, etc., rocket scientists, you name it, you want them, in order to calculate the EEDI in these days, especially with the uncertainties involved in the calculation of EEDI. So you see it's more or less, you see the formula here. It's main engine emissions plus auxiliary engine emissions plus shaft generators motors minus efficiency technologies. It's more or less the concept. This is the concept. Now, this is the baselines. As we pass up to the January 1st of 2015, phase 0, and we move on to phase 1, you see that as we move up to 1st of January of 2025, we have to go down and we have to demonstrate more or less 30% improvement in terms of EEDI, meaning a vessel built with 2015 standards competing with a vessel built on 2025 standards. That's a 10-year difference. They will have more or less 30% difference. This is what the curves here say, in terms of EEDI. It will distort competition in the market. Believe it or not, it will distort competition in the market. Now, Yannis and Professor Psaraftis said earlier on, this is more or less the 3 tricks with the EEDI. The first trick, you minimize the numerator, meaning you minimize the installed power. How much? Nobody knows. We don't have minimum guidelines for minimum installed power. The second trick, you add energy-saving devices. If you remember, on the nominator, you subtract these things, meaning the more you do, the better the EEDI. At what cost? At what in real life? So everyone is trying to selling at the moment something in theory, in papers. What will happen in real life? You don't know, and you don't get a guarantee. The third one, if you go in the previous slide, you see the type here. You calculate the EEDI, it's A times B into minus A. If you want to have a better, let's say, baseline, for a given cargo, for a given dead weight, in order to maximize cargo capacity, you have minimum light weight, meaning structural concerns. These are the 3 key tricks for the EEDI. Now, EEDI and EEOI, or Design Index and Operational Indicator, are not the same. There's no relation. EEDI measures some sort of design, let's say, initiatives in order to improve energy efficiency. Energy Efficiency Operational Indicator means CO2 per ton mile. So this is actually in real life. There's no relationship other than the general principle: the better the EEDI, the better the EEOI, more or less. Now, let's see the market-based measures. We have 9 to 10 proposals so far. 3 or 4 are the most, let's say, possible runner-ups. We have the International Greenhouse Gas Fund, a proposal by Denmark. The Greece is following this proposal by Denmark, is by far the most simple and I would say the most easygoing concept on how to regulate the market. We have efficiency incentive scheme presented by Japan and the World Shipping Council. We have emissions trading scheme. This is the most undesirable scheme proposed by Norway, UK, Germany, and France. And we have mandatory CO2 emission cut targets. This is a proposal by Bahamas. So the Greenhouse Gas Fund, this is Denmark proposal. It's more or less setting a global reduction target set by UNFCCC. UNFCCC, for those who are not familiar with the terminology, is the UN agency responsible for the climate change. UNFCCC stands for United Nations Framework Conference on Climate Change. So this is the party, the agency within the UN who are responsible for the Kyoto Protocol and the implementation of the Kyoto Protocol, the climate change, etc. So the UNFCCC is something like the IMO. Let's say it's better than the IMO, higher than the IMO, because they talk with more countries, more key stakeholders, etc. So it could be set, this global reduction target, by either UNFCCC or the IMO. Now, emissions could be offset by purchasing approved emission reduction credits. The offsetting activities may be financed by a levy, a tax on fuels, actually. This is the concept. Now, contribution may be adjusted in intervals in the future in order to readjust for what is going on. And this is more or less the concept. The positive things, the pros, by far the most simple approach. Who emits has to pay. Simple as that. You buy fuel, you pay a tax. It's a very simple concept, and it's actually the most, let's say, compatible with the industry at the moment as a concept. It's by far the best developed, and there's no further burden for the ship operator. The cons actually, they are for all concepts. You need to set up a new authority, global authority, who will monitor the scheme. There's a complexity of bunker supply chain, meaning you have to more or less certify all the bunker suppliers. It's not as simple as it seems. It's a huge mess. You have to certify refineries, suppliers, all the supply chain of the fuel. And it needs some sort of monitoring and adjustment, plus the fact that many countries will perceive this as a taxation, meaning it's very difficult. Someone might get the tax and not, let's say, give the tax to the international authority who would be responsible, a clearing house or something like this. The second one, the energy incentive scheme, it's a collection of funds to a greenhouse gas fund, similar to those proposed by Denmark, but here the funds are to be paid only by the ships not meeting the efficiency standards. Not meeting the efficiency standards. The third one, the emissions trading scheme, it's a proposal for emissions trading by Norway, UK, Germany, France. So the emissions trading scheme would apply to all CO2 emissions from ship up to a certain size, a certain type, etc. The ship would most probably need to provide a ship emission unit, a SEU or credit unit for every ton of CO2 they emit. So there should be some sort of trading mechanism, a lot of difficulties in order to set up such a mechanism, a monitoring scheme, etc. And there should be some sort of action revenue to provide, and there should be some global auctioning process. Now, the pros, may link shipping into wider greenhouse gas reduction initiatives in other industries, like the aviation industry or other industries, shore industries. It could be a global reduction target, so more or less, it makes sense. In the eyes of someone who is outside the shipping industry, it does make sense. The cons, it's a highly sophisticated scheme, totally out of the market logic, most expensive, it defines a cap, and you need to comply. So it's not a simple thing. It will most probably generate a chaos in the market. Now, the last one, the CO2 emission targets, this is Bahamas proposal. Professor Psaraftis said earlier on, the guys who made the EEDI had good intentions. You all know that the road to hell is full of good intentions. You all know that. The point is the Bahamas proposal is the EEDI. The EEDI was a Bahamas proposal. Here they have a similar proposal, and they say new ships need to have some sort of no penalties, no rewards, no funds to be collected. There should be some target. We set the target, existing ships, for example, up to 15 years, 15 to 20 years, or 25 plus years, there should be some targeted reduction. You make on your own calculations how you comply with these reductions. No compliance, no trade. In other words, no martini, no party. Simple as that. So we'll be running out of martini, most probably, if we go under this one. The pros, immediate, direct, measurable greenhouse gas emissions, global reduction target, etc. The cons, imposes a cap on ships' activity. If you reach certain CO2 emission level, the ship will be out of the market. Remember, no martini, no party. So difficult to, it's very nice if you're here, but it doesn't make sense in real life. If the vessel emits more than it should be, it would be out of the market. There's no penalty, there's no certification, nothing. So this would be a very difficult proposal to go on. Now, all market-based measures have some sort of common, let's say, problems. We need a new international authority who will monitor the scheme. All schemes based on bunker delivery node, meaning we have to certify all the fuel supply chain. The refineries, the bunker suppliers, the ship. Then we need someone to go on board the vessel and verify the amount of fuel received, plus the bunker delivery nodes, etc. Who would do that? Most probably a classification society. Is a classification society a type of organization you imagine doing this? I don't know. You name it, we are there. We need someone to go on board the vessel and verify the fuel consumed. Then someone will set a baseline. More or less, someone will set the baseline. Who will set the baseline? Would it be the IMO, the UNFCCC? Okay, if you go in the Kyoto Protocol, there's no progress. You see all these COPs, Conference of the Parties. They have in Cancun, they have in South Africa, etc. There's no progress going on. You see even Canada is going out of the Kyoto Protocol. Why? Americans are not accepting the Kyoto Protocol. Why? They see no meaning in this. So who will set the baseline? Who will set the industry targets? Who will guarantee that the rules will not change? And what about the flag state that would most probably provide some easy way to go out of the scheme? Nobody knows. Now, it's not easy to predict. It's not easy at all. Actually, many stakeholders like ports and charterers have their own rules or requesting specific things from the operators. You see, for example, market practices. Maersk is reporting for slow steaming. Slow steaming, used since 2009 by Maersk Line. They are reporting 7% improvement, and they say they have savings for bunker costs up to 50%. Hanjin Shipping, they report several CO2 emission reduction measures like turbocharger cutoff, application of low friction paints, use of fuel additives, route optimization, etc. They say CO2 index reduced by 12% compared to 2008 levels. COSCO Group, they report the implementation of several emission reduction measures like, for example, use of additives, engine temperature control, speed reduction, speed optimization, etc. No specific figures. And the last one, BP, is reporting on virtual arrival. Virtual arrival is a concept actually developed by Idertanko and O'Keefe. They say, BP says that virtual arrival may reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a factor of, let's say, 5%, but it's not realized yet. So an operator has to set up, in line with the regulations, has to set up some sort of energy efficiency options, need to set up a ship energy efficiency management plan, need to account for the vessel type, design, age, trading area, etc., KPIs, CO2, NOx, SOx, KPI monitoring, and has to tune his system with existing or future standards. We have 14,001 and 50,001. And needs to consider, for example, the budget, the policy, The energy efficiency measures, the KPIs, the person who will monitor and coordinate this scheme ashore and on board. There's nothing in the guidelines for this one. If you don't have a responsible person in the SEEMP guideline, there's no responsible person. If you go to 14,001, there's a responsible person at the office and on board. Most probably you need to set up some sort of environmental meeting on board, energy assessment on energy audit, any forms, you need to introduce several forms or additional documentation, you need to train your staff, etc. So in order to develop the energy efficiency management plan, you need to set up the company policy, do your energy efficiency assessment fleet-wide, provide the energy efficiency measures for the fleet, set up KPIs, develop the SEEMP, have someone responsible at the office and on board, train your staff, do the audits, review any other environmental standards, and consider review and improvement in the long run. Now, in order to conclude, we launched an energy efficiency survey in Safety4Sea back in the January of 2012. We collect, grade, and analyze opinions. We have the success of the anti-piracy survey we held last year, and we want to share best practices. So it's easy to complete, and it takes only 5 minutes to complete. We are requesting demographics, review of energy efficiency measures, EEDI, MBMs, plus open feedback. So we prompt you to log into the website and fill in this survey. Now, the preliminary feedback so far, we have popular energy reduction measures, like, for example, slow steaming, crew awareness, SEEMP, weather routing, optimum trim and ballast, hull and proper air cleaning, proper main engine and auxiliary engine maintenance, and energy management. And we have open feedback so far, more or less like what Mr. Zupa said earlier on. IMO work is rocket science. EEDI is wrong. It should make sense. It shouldn't be there. MBMs will create chaos. We need to do a lot of additional things. This is not the proper way to solve the problem. Operators are not being asked. And someone might say this is simply resistant to change. Maybe, maybe not. The point is that there's a diverging, let's say, attitude at the moment. Many operators feel, in my view, correct, that the regulators are way ahead and they don't have a clue of what is going on in the operator side. So in real life, regulators and operators need to work together. I mean, they should have converging approaches to common problems, not diverging. You see, for example, if we impose a speed limit, what the charterer will say? The charterer says, go proceed maximum speed. So what they say if we have a speed limit? It's not that simple. Now, you need to stay alerted. There's a concept in the industry, the speed limits. It's a concept promoted by a certain...
That is a charter matter.
What do you mean?
The charter says.
That's okay. You need to stay alert, you need to stay informed, and you need to critically evaluate what you hear. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much.